Muwatta Imam Malik was first book to be given the title Asahhul Kutubi Ba'da Kitabillah, the most authentic book or the most sahih book after the book of Allah. There was another great muhaddis, his name was Abdul Razak San'ani from Yemen, and he was one of the shuyukh of Imam Ahmad, and Imam Ahmad is one of the shuyukh of Imam Bukhari, so he lived long before, and he has compiled his own collection of hadith, and it's titled Musannif Abdul Razak. The other one by Ibn Abi Shayba, Abu Bakr bin Abi Shayba, is entitled Musannif Ibn Abi Shayba. These were all books which were written long before Imam Bukhari rahmahullah wrote his work. Hence, for example, if Imam Abu Haneefah rahmahullah, he lived beginning of the 2nd century of Islam, so the link was short. So if there was a narration which had been passed on from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to a sahabi, to a tabi'i, he himself was a tabi'i, or if he heard a hadith from a tabi'i, there were usually 2 or 3 links, or at the most 4 links. And there are narrations which Imam Abu Haneefah rahmahullah had received with 3 or 4 links. But Imam Bukhari has compiled only 20 with 3 links. The rest 6, 7, 8. So if there was a hadith which was sahih in the beginning, passed on by righteous, intelligent, trustworthy, truthful people, but later on somebody who was not so trustworthy, not so intelligent, and passed it on, now that weak link has appeared after him. That weak link. So in the term of Imam Abu Haneefah rahmahullah, that hadith could have easily been sahih, but by the time it reached Imam Bukhari, it had now become da'if. Inshallah, today's session will be discussing how to understand hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The word hadith in Arabic, it comes from the root word hadatha. Hadatha means a happening, something which happens. So hadith is a statement of anything which happens. If a person brings a report about anything, it could be any statement. The literal meaning of a statement is a hadith. But obviously in Islam over the years, hadith has come to acquire a special implication and a special meaning. When a statement is referred to the teachings or a practice or a saying of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then that is referred to as a hadith. And many scholars throughout the history of Islam have compiled books of hadith, and those books of hadith contain sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what the Prophet said. Many of those hadiths are statements which the Prophet didn't make himself, but sahabah have narrated on behalf of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and narrated about something which the Prophet has done. And in some instances, in many of the books of hadith, there are statements which are to do not with the practice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, nor of the sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but are practices or sayings of the sahabah. Generally, a term or the word used to describe a saying of a sahabi which he makes of himself without narrating it to the Prophet, assigning it to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is referred to as athar. A sahabi's qawl is often referred to as athar, but in the books of ahadith, which are known as books of hadith, there are sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what the Prophet said. Then there are narrations which are to do with what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has done. So the actual saying is not of the Prophet but of the sahabi, but on behalf or describing an action of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in many instances, these books of hadith also contain practices of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and in many instances they also contain sayings of the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, often referred to as athar. And in some instances, the books of hadith also contain sayings not of the Prophet, not of the companions, but of tabi'een as well. Because when we look at the compilation of hadiths, the compilation of hadith really took off in the 3rd century of Islam. The Prophet ﷺ lived, our Islamic calendar begins with Hijrah. When the Prophet ﷺ migrated from Mecca to Medina, that was the first year of Hijrah. And he left this world in the 11th year after Hijrah. And Sahaba Ridwanullahi Majma'een were around till the end of almost the first century. Very few Sahaba. When we look at in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, obviously everybody, especially in Medina, who had seen the Prophet ﷺ was a Sahabi. But after the Prophet ﷺ left this world, obviously no new person could become a Sahabi. People then who became Muslims but did not see the Prophet ﷺ with Iman, they might have even seen the Prophet before becoming Muslims. Someone who saw the Prophet ﷺ before embracing Islam but did not see the Prophet after embracing Islam, even such a person is not termed as a Sahabi. Sahabi is a person who saw the Prophet ﷺ with Iman and then lived with the same Iman and died with the same Iman. There were a few instances whereby some people became Muslims and then they left Islam. In one or two instances, Allah then enabled them, they became Muslims again. One such example was the foster brother of Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. His name was Abdullah bin Sa'ad bin Abi Sarh. Initially he became a Muslim, then left Islam. But at the conquest of Mecca, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had ordered certain people be beheaded even if they are found clinging to the door of Kaaba. Among them was Ikramah bin Abi Jahl, Wahshi who martyred Hamza radiallahu ta'ala anhu, and another person in them was Abdullah bin Sa'ad bin Abi Sarh. Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and sought special permission and forgiveness from the Prophet, and the Prophet forgave him, and he re-embraced Islam and then remained firm and steadfast upon Islam. And then in the later years, during the Khilafat of Usman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he was also made governor of Egypt, and then he was also responsible for the propagation of Islam deep into Africa. So a person who became a Muslim in the hands of the Prophet ﷺ was a Sahabi. So when the Prophet was alive in Medina, everybody was a Sahabi. But when the Prophet ﷺ left this world, many Sahaba, they spread out far and wide to other parts of the world. Some to Mecca, some to Damascus, some to Yemen, some to Palestine, some went into Egypt and so on. And they spread out in different parts of the world. And many more people, they came to settle in Medina, and many other territories were captured and conquered. So the population of Muslims exploded, as it were. So overall, and as well as that, in many expeditions, many Sahaba were martyred. So within a few years, particularly during the Khilafat of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when the population of Muslims, mashallah, really exponentially increased. Exponentially means to go up, very rapidly. And when increased so rapidly, so during his Khilafat, the percentage of Sahaba, when you bear in mind that the maximum number of Sahaba which has been mentioned by historians is about 140,000. But within a few years of the Prophet leaving this world, that number had decreased to say 120,000. And when the Prophet left this world, 140,000, 100% were almost Sahaba. But when the number of Muslims increased to 1 million, so the number of Sahaba decreased, and it became almost only 10%. Yeah? And with time, within the Khilafat of Umar, Usman and Ali radiallahu ta'ala, the percentage of Sahaba in the Ummah overall was merely 2-3%, you could say, because the population really exploded and increased very, very quickly. And so the Sahaba Ridwanullahi Majma'een were only a few thousand or few percent. And Sahaba Ridwanullahi Majma'een, most of them could not read and write, and they used to pass on. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu is a Sahabi who has narrated the most hadith, but he himself could not read and write. And but because of the dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, once the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him to open his lap, to hold out his shirt, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam read something and blew